All right, this video is going to cover profiles. Oftentimes, these profiles are going to be center lines. They could be your stream, but um, center lines used in analyses also live up here in profiles. Those center lines can also be used to create sample frames if you derived cross sections off those profiles and you have a riverscape delineation. You can use those three inputs um, for sample frames. So there's a few different ways that you can get a center line. You can import it from data you already have, a temporary layer if you just had a scratch layer in QGIS. You can manually digitize your own based on, a delineation of your riverscape. Or, as you've seen before, you can pull data in through existing riverscapes projects. So the first way we're going to bring it in or we're going to generate a center line is through existing data. So easiest way you can do this is open a Riverscapes VBET project. And if you go down through these outputs, any one of these shape files has the ability to add to Curious. So, these are just different views of essentially the same thing, but under here, under sample frames, there's a center line. So easiest way is add to Curious. And we're just going to call this CL1. And I actually want to clip it to that area of interest I have open, which is my reach drainage wing that I got from the watershed catchments tool. Okay, so I have a center line, and everything in that center line, anything you bring in from the viewer is going to end up in context. So basically, here's what you have. We're looking at our riverscape, which I haven't delineated yet. It's this one here, this main valley. So now I can go into the center lines and I can edit them, just delete the ones that I don't need. And then I'm also just going to merge into one feature. So there it is. So I have a center line. Granted, it does live down here in context. It's not up in profiles. So there's a few different ways you could get it in profiles to use in analyses or to use in generating sample frames. Probably the easiest way. I'll definitely add a new ability to promote to a profile, but as of now, best way to get this into profiles is to either create a manually digitized, so I'll do that and I'll just call it centerline 1. Oops, that one already exists in context. Centerline 2, let's do that. So now you can see it's empty. I can very easily go to edit in where it exists in context. And up here at the top, there's copy. Then I'm going to stop editing that, and I'll edit this. And I'm going to hit paste. Save, quit editing. So now what I have I basically just manually promoted this center line up into profiles. And now in profiles, I can generate cross sections if I wanted to. I can use it in analyses. Um, yeah, and you can see too when once it's in profiles, it gets a automatic length calculation. So pretty useful to have it up there versus down in context. So I'm going to remove that from the map. All right, another way you can get a center line, which is I would say probably even an easier way than that, even though this is already existing data, is to just derive one from the valley bottom. And the reason I say it's easier is because we need our valley bottom anyways. Valley bottom's used as kind of your riverscape's extent, and it's oftentimes the boundary of your sample frames. Valley bottom's just, it's going to exist in the project. So if we go back to the VBET project and we add that valley bottom extent to the map, this is what we're after, is this, valley bottom polygon. So as we did before, all I'm going to do is right click, add to curious. I'm going to leave it as VBET, and I'm going to clip it to my drainage wing. So now if I remove VBET from the map, here's our valley bottom polygon. And you can see I have these other features in it because it clipped it to the reach. I can just click on my main valley bottom and then hit this invert selection. I'm just going to delete those other features. And now I can go into my valley bottom polygon. I'm just going to change how it looks here a little bit so that I can edit it. Need a solid line border. So you can see it needs a little bit of editing, which not a big deal. It's a better starting point than just starting from scratch. It's a little faster. But I could just come in here, reshape my valley bottom to be a little more representative of our riverscape. I'm just doing this fast, but do a little bit more here. Okay, I'm going to call that good enough for this demo. So now I'll save those edits. So now I have a VBET, a valley bottom polygon representing our riverscape reach. And now I can right click on that context and generate a center line. This dialog will pop up. It has some smoothing options you can change if you want. Its defaults are pretty good, so only mess with those if you feel like you really need to. But what you do is select the feature and click and drag and release. It's not a click, it's click, hold down, drag and release. And then we go to the other end of our polygon and do the same thing and hit generate center line. So there we go. We have a center line for our polygon, and it's a little different in some places because I did some edits where this was based off the unedited valley bottom. So you can see the center line's a little bit different. And then you can save that center line. But one thing I'll show you is a way you could screw up here if your valley bottom has a funky shape. So we're going to exit out of this real quick. And we're going to edit this. There we go. So we'll go back into generating a center line. You want to watch out for dragging your cursor across an open space, because if I hit generate now, you're going to see I get an error. And it's always nice, you can go up to these errors and it will tell you what to do. Go to Python error, and what it's saying is unable to find one central polygon between the clip lines. Make sure clip lines are clean across the polygon. So it doesn't like this. That's not clean. There's a start endpoint, so it confuses it. So we can just recapture and make sure there's no holes and generate center line, and there you go, you get a new one. So we'll save it, and we already have CL2, so we'll call this CL3. There we go. We have a new center line, auto-calculated length. So now we have two center lines that we could potentially use in our analyses or for generating sample frames with. And then finally, if you've delineated your riverscape boundary, you can also just create your own. Especially at a reach scale, this would be difficult to do if you were, doing a lot of different reaches or a really long reach. Probably not the best way to go about it, but what you get is an empty feature class, and you can edit and just eyeball it. It's not very hard to capture that center of our valley pretty well at this reach scale. So I'm just eyeballing center line. We'll save that. And then if we turn everything off, you can see there's some variation, but there's not a huge difference. 2147, 2188, 2271. So there is some variation, but either one of these would be an acceptable way to get a valley bottom center line. So now that we have those different pathways to do it, one thing I do want to mention is somewhere you might get confused. We'll reopen that VBET project. Because one thing you've been taught to do is to bring in DGOs. So if I add those to my map, these VBET, this is what I just brought in. So like I said, everything goes in context. So you might be tempted to generate a center line off this. Well, the problem is it's a bunch of different features, and you would have to generate a center line for each one of these, and they may end and start at different places. And then when it comes to analyses, you would need that whole thing merged so that it's looking at each sample frame with one center line through it, and it for the calculation. So you don't want a bunch of center lines for each individual sample frame. But if I go to generate center line and I just select the features that I want and try and capture that, you get this error where it can only be one feature. So, there's a few different ways you could handle this. You could just edit this intermediates, get rid of the features you don't want, and if you wanted to make this one of your sample frames, you could promote it to a sample frame and then it would end up here. You'd still have this VBET intermediates that you could then select and merge. But now essentially all I have is an unedited version of the VBET output that I already messed with. So, but I could, if I wanted, capture the start, capture the end, generate a center line. There we go. So I just did it on two different polygon imports, but my suggestion is if you want sample frames, start with the DGOs, make edits to that, promote it to a sample frame, and then merge it like I just did. If you're going to create your own sample frames from a valley bottom, a center line, and cross sections, I would say just import the valley bottom extent and edit that and drive a center line off of that. Long story short, though, there's a lot of different pathways to get at the same thing, but the main limiting factors are you generate center lines from within the context node. You can't do it off of AOIs. And your feature that you're generating a center line has to be one singular feature. So if you're doing it for a reach, you got to merge all those separate features into one.